when we have a land use item, those are open forums. It's a matter of a public meeting. And when we make a decision with regards to land use, those items per the charter are not even subject to veto by you. So basically, council is the final authority on those particular matters. But we don't want to. But I think the whole point of this conversation is we don't want to do that in a void. We don't want to, because we realize that if we change things, potentially change things, and Brandy Lewis is the great example. If we change things, that has very significant impacts on the potential for economic development in town. So I guess my first question is, how do we work through that? How do you want to work through that? Obviously, we're going to have a public hearing. Let me just make a hypothetical example. Let's say the Ultra Resources came in and wanted to downzone certain parts of Brandy Lewis to allow to downzone it to an agricultural, which is the only zoning in Colorado Springs right now where you can do that type of operation. And it comes to us, and we say, yeah, we'll listen to that as part of a public hearing because we are the final determiners with regards to a rezoning, in this case a downzoning. But does that fit in with what you may or may not want to do with economic development? So how do you want to interject at that point to get your point in, and how do we want to interface with us? Because we're going to make a decision, but we don't want to make that decision in a void. We want to make that decision in the best interest of the city, and obviously the best interest of the city oftentimes are economic development issues.
Well, that to me is an example where we need to build a dialogue. A phone call from you would help to say, hey, coming up is going to be a discussion, or from Amy, or whoever you designate, so at least I'm aware of what the discussion is going to be and an opportunity for us to discuss it and enough time to discuss it. You know, I think you've now asked for 2 weeks advance notice before we can put anything on the agenda, and then you want another 2 weeks to make decisions. So you now want a full month from the time we bring up the subject to make a decision. I hope that's not arbitrary. I hope there'll be some flexibility there. Certainly on the big stuff, a month or more is appropriate, but there's some other matters which hopefully we can accelerate. But in terms of this question, Scott, I think it's just a matter of either you and I, or maybe it's, again, Amy and in this case, Steve Cox, are staying in close touch on that.
And I would say, Mayor, if I could, that land use, obviously that's going to come through our planning department. So we're going to have knowledge of that, and we'll have that. We'll have a position, staff will have a position, and the mayor will have full knowledge.
We just don't want to come up to a point where the council's going to vote on an ordinance,
right,
and we haven't had a chance to talk about it, and I might not yet be fully in agreement. And that's what we want to avoid.
Right. And as you know, Steve, it is entirely conceivable you could have a land use item, you could come through with a specific recommendation, and at its first stop at the planning commission, they could decide to say, yeah, there's your recommendation, but we're going to vote otherwise. And so now we get kind of conflict because we've got the staff recommendation, which I assume is kind of vetted within the mayor's office and the staff, and then we've got the planning commission coming to us with potentially a different recommendation, and then we're trying to, you know, split the proverbial baby at that point. So.
Well, so it just means that
lots of coordination.
Lots of coordination between, in this case, Amy again, and Steve Cox. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the chance to be in the conversation early, and first of all, just be educated on what it's all about, and then offer whatever I might in a way like this.
You know, both in the, and I'm sorry to make references to the old form of government, but under the old form of government as well as this form of government, I've seen cases already where staff makes a recommendation to the planning commission decides to do something different than the recommendation, and then it comes to us. We've overturned the planning commission under both forms of government, just because we try to look at it with a broader viewpoint, and part of that broader, and I've had this discussion with members of the planning commission, is sometimes we're taking a broader viewpoint and we're looking at other issues than just maybe a simple rezoning or a simple development or something like that. So we just need more input on that as we're trying to do that.
Well, and we internally need to make sure the staff is not making recommendations that we haven't vetted.
Exactly.
That's something that's happened.
That's key, along with really when we have a laser focus going forward on infill development. I think it's important from an economic point of view too that we're all in agreement.
And Councilman Snyder had proposed this item, and his interest was as much as vision, it was about vision as much as it was about practical matters. So that when we do our strategic planning, are we going to talk about land use, and again, as Mr. Cox said, infill development, such things, in the strategic advancement of our community, and looking at Fanning Lewis Ranch and what this community wants to see happen there. So, since he is not here, I thought I would
On that,
add
Amy, in terms of this role of land use and economic development, does this also suggest that we're gonna go through a process of rethinking our community design at a higher level? In other words, a fresh look at how we think this community should evolve over the next 20, 30 years, with or without Fanning Lewis Ranch? Is that timely? Is that appropriate to do that?
Well, I guess I would go back to Steve and say, wouldn't we do that as part of a review of the comprehensive plan anyway?
But I think the mayor's suggested we would take that to a higher level of discussion, so, we'll be working on that and bring that forward.
You bring that forward, Justin. All right, Al Snyder wanted to have open discussion. He's not here. Tim Lee, you have not said a word, which is a real concern.
Mayor, can I segue
Sure.
that last one, just so at least we have some sort of understanding? It is my understanding, and this may be correct, that when items come forward on the agenda, that they have been vetted through staff and they have been vetted through you. So by the time that we're voting on them, or they're being brought before us, you're in agreement. Is that true?
That sounds like a question to ask the witness on the stand. I will tell you that I don't think in my first 9 months that has always been the case. I believe going forward that will be the case.
Okay, so as an example, when the bike race came forward, were you in agreement with that or not?
You heard what I said, Brandy. I said if, well,
but
you
I
heard
mean, I
what,
wanna
Brandy, you
know
heard what I
because
said. I said if it were left to me,
forward.
I would table it.
Okay,
But Steve Cox, who was out of town,
right,
felt differently. I respect Steve Cox, his expertise,
right.
his perspective, and I thought, since he feels so strongly about it, he's got the 31 years here, I don't, okay? That rather than me coming to you without Steve Cox having a chance to explain the event, that I would say, this is coming forward, he can't be here today. If it were left to me, I would table it and put it on the agenda among other ideas for 2013. And that was awkward, and it put you in an awkward position. So I think I know where you're going with this, which is, in the future, we hope to get better at giving you our a united position. In that case, but on the other hand, I don't know that you want me coming in as mayor 100% of the time and saying, we don't support this or we do support it. If there's an honest difference of opinion among senior staff on something, I'm very comfortable, if you are, with saying, you know what, I'm thinking this is not necessarily the right time to do this, or not the best thing to do, but here's somebody I have great respect for, he does. What we probably should have done, I wasn't of that frame of mind at the moment, was ask for a tabling until Steve Cox could be here and give his full pitch on that. So, but no, we need to come forward with a position that's definitive. That's fair, and in this case, I learned from this case. I should have said, excuse me, but we talked about it 2 weeks ago.
The bike thing was brought forth by a citizen group, not staff necessarily.
But it was kind of.
I mean, they proposed,
We were